Hello everyone, today's poem is 忆秦娥箫声夜 by Li Bai. This poem is quite unique, not only among the poems by Li Bai, it's unique in the Chinese classic poetry. This poem was so-called the founder of the 词 in the history. 词 is a very popular type, poetry type since Song Dynasty, but actually it started even much further, several hundred years before Song Dynasty, and until the Tang Dynasty, this type of writing forms was well established, and this poem was treated as the founder of that type. 词 normally for today's Chinese we call it 宋词, but actually it doesn't was invented in the Song Dynasty. Not only as the founder of 宋词 or 词, but it was treated by the later generations of poets that the far sight will, the strong positive voice, has never been surpassed by the late comers. This poem belongs to the very decent and classic poetry type of 思妇怀人, the wife, worry and think of her husband in the battlefield, in the frontier areas. So this is very classical. Anyhow, in the Tang Dynasty, this type of poetry became very popular and could be from any angles. From the angles of a woman in the royal palace, from the angle of a woman who married to a businessman. This poem appears to be very classical because the subject it was writing about is a wife worry of her husband in the battlefield. We will see in the poem. There are some arguments about this poem if Li Bai was the real author of this poem, because the first time this poem showed up in history was in Song Dynasty, roughly 200 years after Li Bai's death, and there's no other references in other Li Bai's poetry collections. And also, the second doubt, that's my personal doubt, that the feelings showed in this poem is a little bit different from other Li Bai's poetry. Li Bai was with a very strong character, with extremely self-consciousness. So even he showed a lot of the efforts or his feelings toward the country, toward the fate of the emperors, but finally the feelings or the fundamental feelings is always about himself, his own fury, his own happiness. And in this poem, it's quite different. He showed his careness to the fate of the country, to the normal people, the worrying wife. Anyhow, you cannot feel Li Bai himself, his feelings, his furies or his worries in this poem. And finally, especially the last two sentences in this poem, is a little bit settled down with the situation, the bad situation of the time, because the Tang dynasty started declining. It's not a good time, but he settled down with that bad situation. That's definitely or that's never showed up in Li Bai's other poems, because he never settled down with the fate of the country. He never settled down with the fate of himself. This is my personal doubt or guesswork if Li Bai was the real author of this poem, and some other people figured out or guess this poem could be written by someone in the late Tang period. And in the late Tang period, the Tang people still continued their far-sighted will, their ambitious, but in reality, we can see that from Du Mu, from Li Shangyin, the most famous late Tang period poets, that they feel helpless. So this atmosphere or this feeling expressed in this poem is quite similar to to Du Mu and Li Shangyin's feeling, the helpless feelings. Now let's look at the poem. 忆秦娥，箫声夜。李白。箫声夜，秦娥梦断秦楼月。秦楼月，年年柳色，灞陵伤别。乐游原上清秋节，咸阳古道阴沉绝。阴沉绝，西风残照，汉家陵阙。So we can see the specialty of this type of poem, 词 or 宋词, is it's in long and short sentences, and also it comes with music. It's always synced with music. We also can notice that from the repeating words in the second sentence, 秦楼月 or 阴沉绝. So that's the very typical characteristic of a song. Some parts was repeated for the rhythm's sake, and also the repeating words, repeating sentence in a song make the wordings more peacefully and more lasting. This is 词 or 宋词. The title of this poem is 箫声夜. The first part, 忆秦娥, is the name for this type of writing or 词牌. So it defines the writing pattern and the music it comes with. 忆秦娥 recall to the girl so-called 秦娥. 秦娥, in general speaking, refers to the beautiful women and girls in the Qin place. Basically, is the place surrounding Chang'an city, the capital city, because in the warrior state's time, this place was the kingdom of Qin. Well, with this title of 忆秦娥, the term 秦娥 refers to a particular girl in the warrior state's period, a princess of Qin kingdom. She married to a famous musician who is very good at Chinese flute, 排箫 or 箫, and he also teach his wife. Finally, Qin becomes his wife. He teaches his wife to play the Chinese flute as well. And someday they ride on a dragon and a phoenix. The husband ride on the dragon. The wife, Qin ride on the phoenix. They fly up to the heavens, became immortal people. So that normally implies or implicate a very, very happy and good marriage. They have the same interest, and finally they have a wonderful, good ending. In this poem, it's writing from the angle of a Tang people or Tang woman's angle. She's recalling the story roughly 1,500 years ago, that happy marriage, that good marriage, that happy couple. So 箫声 is very meaningful. That's the focal point of that happy couple. But in this day, in the Tang Dynasty time, the sound of flute is so sad. Yeah, we have saw this term in many poems. It means the sound, the crying was with very low volume and it stuck in the throat. It didn't go out, not burst into tears, not cry out, but it refers the sadness is so huge and the person want to depressed or cover up his or her sadness. So the first three characters, 箫声夜, it's writing very straightforward. The wife is worrying and thinking of her husband, but it's so sad because even the Chinese flute sound is sad. 秦娥梦断秦楼月. The second sentence makes it more clearly. The girl with the name 秦娥wake up from her dream on the high-rise building with the moon shining on that building. The moon always implies thinking about relative, thinking about friends. And so we know it's very clearly the sadness is about thinking about her husband. And also, he used 秦娥 to refer that girl, used 秦楼 to refer that building, which means it could be any wife in this area. It could be any house, any family in this area surrounding the Chang'an city or within the Chang'an city. So this poem is not writing about a particular woman, a particular family. It's writing about a normal person, normal wife, an average family in the Tang Dynasty, especially in this area. 秦楼月，年年柳色，灞陵伤别. So this following sentences goes more specifically about what the sadness is about. It's about departing. So every year, the willow is so beautiful, so green in the spring, but with such a beautiful, happy weather, scenic views, the people sing farewells at Baling. Baling is also a very famous term in many Tang poetries. That's the place to say farewell to each other. There are a lot of other poems use another term, 灞柳, the willows along the Ba River, to express the same feeling, the sadness of parting. Because the pronunciation in Mandarin, the willow, was almost same with another character, liu, which means to keep hold of, to keep someone stay with you, because at the sight to see someone off or parting, the people always don't want let them go, want to keep them stay with you. In the first paragraph, it expressed the sadness of parting. The wife and the husband could be parted for 10 years, for 20 years, or even 30 years, or maybe forever. The soldier, the husband, died in the battlefield. It was expressed very clearly in the poem. Every year, 年年柳色, every year, the willow's color was so beautiful, so green, but the wife can never see the husband back and keep her husband at home. The term 秦娥 and xiao, the Chinese flute, was used to introduce the story about that couple who played the Chinese flute together, to use that happy family, happy marriage to contrast the sadness of Tang family, of the Tang marriage. 乐游原上清秋节，咸阳古道阴沉绝。So we come to the famous place, 乐游原 again. You can search my other videos for 乐游原. There's so many poems writing about 乐游原. Basically, it's a high-rise plateau within the capital city. You can, from here, from this plateau, you can overlook to the royal palace. You can overlook to the mausoleum of the Han Emperor. You can also look to the mausoleum, the tombs of the Tang Emperor. And also you can look to the west gateways, and to the east gateways of the capitals. Also, we know the time when the poet writing this poem, 乐游原上清秋节, that's 重阳节 today, and this year is October 7th. That's the Double Night Festival. Basically, this festival is to climb up, look into the distance, and thinking about your families and friends, and also bless for the long life. So basically, that's this festival about. At this point of time, the poet Li Bai looked to the broad road, to the frontiers in the direction of the north, to the east, to the west, and there's no sound and there's no dust on that broad road to the frontier areas, to the battlefields. So what does there's no sound and no dust on that road? So basically, the road is for the transportation for the soldiers, for the supply of the warfares, for the messengers. So there's trucks, horses, and peoples come back and forth. And in this poem, the poet described it as there's no dust, no sound, which means there's nothing happened on the roads to the frontier areas. So there's so many possibilities, and we cannot make sure which are the possibilities. Could be the war was stuck for years and the country was so weak they cannot send new troops, new supplies to them. And in the frontier areas, the front line was stuck. Though there's no good news, there's no bad news. But the people had to stay there, maybe forever, till their death. So, 阴城诀 could be anything, but 诀, the term 诀 has a very, very strong implication, negative feeling that something was about to end. The soldier's life, the country, the dynasty, or anything. So everything means very negative. The last two sentences is the most famous sentences in 1,000 years. 西风残照，汉家陵阙. The west wind blows in the autumn's time, and the sunset shadows on everything. It makes everything feel like fading away. 汉家陵阙. Hanjia refers to the Han dynasty or the emperor of the Hans. Ling means the mausoleum of the emperors. Que is a very unique building in the front gate, only in the Han dynasty. Basically, the Ling plus Que refers to the regime, refers to the emperor, or even refers to the country. So in the surface, the poet keeps looking to the sunset, looking to the west, and feel the west wind. And he looks to the north, and he saw the mausoleum of the Han emperors. But the Han mausoleum also gave you a sense, a time span of 800 years ago. The Tang people always compare themselves as the people of Han dynasty because both dynasty was very powerful and strong for some time, and they also share the same location for the capital, the Chang'an city. And here, for a Tang people, even for today's Chinese, when we read it, we know it very clearly. Hanjia Lingque, it refers to the emperor, to the country of Tang dynasty, rather than Han dynasty. So that's why in my previous introduction about this poem, I said Li Bai, or this poet, he expressed the feeling that he was a little bit settled down with this bad situation of the country. The country is declining. Anyhow, that's the fate of the country, and that's the history, as always. For Tang poetry, the time and the space is always a very interesting aspect. So in this poem, we can see the history span. In the first paragraph, it goes to roughly 1,500 years before Tang dynasty. It refers to something in the warrior states period. And also, he covered up the recent years. Every year, the willow tree looks so beautiful. So the time in the first paragraph, it goes right to the very ancient time and also covers the near very recent history of the Tang dynasty. In the second paragraph, the poet tells us very clearly who was writing this poem in September 9th, some year of middle to late Tang period. And when he keep writing, he refers to the history relics of the Han Dynasty, which it was 800 years before him. So the Tang poets always has a very sensitive sense to the time and history. We can find these aspects in many Tang poetry. And for the space, it looks like he was limited in this ancient Qin kingdom. Basically, it's roughly 500 kilometers wide, 100 kilometers deep, a valley. So that's basically the place he was looking around. But the thinkings was going to the very far away of the frontier battlefields. It could be 1,000 miles. It could be 10,000 miles away from this place. So the time and space is always a very interesting aspect and very fundamental aspects in Tang poetry. And if you have more interest, you can search for the music of Xiao, the Chinese flute. Before Tang Dynasty, it's Pai Xiao. So you can check the picture. And later on, after Tang Dynasty, it becomes the Chinese flute like today. So you can compare the pictures. Okay, that's for today. And I wish you enjoy and have a happy Double Nine Festival. 重阳快乐